going through the AFC, starting with the Buffalo Bills. We'll go through the AFC East first. The Bills did not have a first-round pick. That was traded for Stephon Diggs. I think that's a big win with your first-rounder anyway. Key picks include A.J. Epinesa, the edge defender out of Iowa, a guy that we had a first-round grade on. They get him in the second. Jake Fromm, the quarterback out of Georgia, goes in the fifth. What do you think of this Bills draft, Sam?
Yeah, I think it was solid. Like you say, you got to consider that they didn't have the first round pick. Where are you on the idea of, phrasing things as their first round pick was Stephon Diggs?
I mean,
some people hate that.
Austin said he hates that, but I mean,
Renner hates it as well.
But that's what they did with their first rounder. It doesn't mean it was their first round pick. It's how that asset was used.
Yes, now, the reason I'm kind of with them though, that I don't like just adding it in and saying this was their draft. That wasn't.
But we haven't. I'm explaining what happened.
I'm just asking, where are you on that as a concept? Because that's what
okay. Here's the deal. It's not a
draft that way.
It's not a part of draft grades, so to speak. It's not a part of evaluating the picks that you made, but it's a part of the narrative in the story. So we're talking about the narrative in the story and what this means for the Bills. So we definitely have to explain what happened to the first round pick and then evaluate what they did with the rest of their picks separately, which is what we did on the website. Our website did give them an A- for their haul, given how they deployed their picks.
I think it was solid. Epinesa is going to be the player I think that makes or breaks the draft class because he's a sort of unusual case, this sort of tweener, edge rusher, interior guy. How exactly they deploy him, how exactly he works out is going to be everything. I think Zack Moss, given the running backs that went off the board and where they went, is pretty valuable or pretty good value for where they got him. And then I really like the sort of receivers they got. I think they doubled up with lower round guys. I think both of whom are intriguing players. Jake Fromm to go to Buffalo is kind of fascinating because, I mean, I can't think of a quarterback depth chart that has had different further away variances from arm strength between maybe the strongest arm in the league and maybe the weakest arm in the league. There is going to be a receiver who is lining up doing drills and catching, like one rep is going to be from the laser and the other rep is going to be from the noodle. Like that's just mean. That's hard. Like that just amuses me, to be honest.
Between Allen and Fromm and between Breeze and Jameis. As far as
and like people were,
players.
I tweeted something out and they were like, "Wow, they had their backup as Matt Barkley, so they're used to it." And this is true, but even by Matt Barkley standards, Fromm's got a noodle.
Yeah, Fromm's a good. He projects as a guy that would be a solid backup. I love taking him in round 5. I think he's fairly accurate, but I think he's more on that Cody Kessler spectrum. I saw people compare him actually to Matt Barkley. I saw other analysts use the Matt Barkley comp.
He's a classic case of my my double slider theory, right? His
5 to 7 minutes per team.
His arm strength is all the way down the bottom, so his anticipation and accuracy needs to shoot all the way up to the other end if he's got any kind of shot. And if it doesn't, he's probably not going to succeed.
It's not there yet, right? It's not completely there. Again, love taking him in the 5th round. Those not so toolsy guys who are pretty good football players. You never know how they're going to end up. So love taking those shots. Gabriel Davis adds another, pretty decent outside type of threat to the receiving core. They already have the best receiving core potentially in the NFL. You mentioned Zack Moss when you pair him with Devin Singletary. If you talk about just missed tackle machines, both of those guys the last couple of years. So that offense is really coming together. Just to cap things on Epinesa, though, I've pegged the Bills when people have talked about Yannick Ngakoue and where, I think Ryan Kerrigan could be on the trading block. When teams talk about maybe adding one extra pass rusher, I feel like the Bills, between having some money to spend and having Jerry Hughes, then Mario Addison, he's okay. Now adding A.J. Epinesa, I thought that they were a team that could use that one veteran edge defender. Maybe Epinesa, solve some of that. That'd be high expectations in year 1. They still could be in that market, but they did feel like a team that needed one more pretty good pass rusher up front.
Or a guy like Everson Griffin is still available for presumably not an awful lot. Maybe they add him before the season starts.
Yep. So we did like that draft. Do you have the other draft grades around the the universe that people posted.
Yeah, where did I put them?
So there was a there was a graphic going around yesterday trying to compare.
Yeah, got it.
All of the grades.
Buffalo, they range from an A. We gave them an A-. They range from an A to a C+ was the lowest from Ryan Dunleavy by the New York Post, but basically everybody gave them some form of B or A to give them a 3.31 GPA, apparently.
Great. So we really like what the Bills did. Good job, Bills fans. # Bills Mafia. Nice little draft there. Also, Isaiah Hodgins, solid wide receiver. I love adding those.
Dude, there's some people that love that guy. Eric Crocker was a guy that really, I think he had him insanely high on his list of receivers. So he's an intriguing one.
All right, let's move on to the Miami Dolphins, a team that we gave an A- as well, and for different reasons. They came in, they made 5, 8, 11 picks in the draft, a little different from Buffalo. They set up for this year. I think we liked what they did last year because they set up for this year by trading down and trading for future first round picks. I mentioned on the other night, my favorite thing they did was getting Tua at 5.
Yeah.
Holding their 2 first round picks, 18 and 26, they ended up trading down, but holding their 2 first round picks and still getting Tua, that's the biggest win. What are your thoughts on the class? And I'll give you my very specific thoughts on what I think they did. That was just awesome.
Yeah, again, I'm with you. It's all with the Tua thing. So Peter King's Football Morning in America column was really fascinating today. He was sort of embedded with the Bucs, and there's some real interesting detail in there about what they tried to do, what they did, and how their first round pick unfolded. And the big missing variable that we talked about last time is we don't really know what went on, right? So you're like, on the surface, ideally the team could have done this, and this better, right? They could have traded back, added this, pick, whatever. But you don't know whether they were trying to do that or how close they came or what else was on the table and all this kind of thing. So the Bucs pick looks pretty good on the surface of it, right? They basically they jumped one spot and they drafted a really good tackle. But when you hear what was happening, they were essentially calling every single team from 7 onwards, trying to trade up to get the guy that would have fallen to them where they were picking anyway. Literally the only question mark was whether the 49ers, and this is interesting because the Bucs had a tell on the Joe Staley retirement thing that even Schefter didn't have at that point. So the 49ers might have taken him, but basically they were trying to trade up from 7 onwards. And all they were doing at that point would have been setting fire to draft capital for no purpose. As it turns out. So from the outside, it's like, wow, the Bucs handled that perfectly. From the inside, it's like, wow, they, for whatever it is, 9 straight picks, they were trying to make the situation worse. Whereas the Dolphins, you're on mute, Steve. Whereas the Dolphins are on the other side of this thing. They didn't do anything. Now, were they as masterful on the inside as it looks like they were from the outside, which is they set all the smoke screens so that Tua fell to 5 and they were able to take their guy without giving anything up? Or did they just kind of get lucky with the way things fell? Maybe they were trying to trade up to 2 or 3, didn't happen, and they just, they lucked into it. But this is what we can't tell. But from the outside, it looks like they nailed it. They set all the smoke screens. They played you for a sucker, and Tua was there when they picked at 5. They snagged the quarterback they wanted all along, and everything's gravy from that point on.
Those are the best stories that come out. I mean, all of the what ifs and the intricacies of the various things, because we only know this team, this player, this pick, and there's so much that went into it. That was like the Cowboys a couple years ago trying to trade up to get Paxton Lynch,
right? And
then they stumbled into Dak Prescott in the 4th, which again is part of the reason why, like, hey, taking shots on quarterbacks in rounds 3, 4, 5, absolutely, because you never really know.
The other really interesting
on your top guy.
Yeah, the other really interesting nugget from that is I was saying while it was happening that at the point where CeeDee Lamb was available in the teens, the Vikings must have been really tempted to not maintain discipline and to go try and get him. Sounds like they might have been. They apparently called the Bucs and were trying to get up to wherever they were picking, 14. So the Vikings potentially, instead of getting Jefferson, Gladney, and this first 2 rounds that we think nailed it, they could have set fire to some of that draft capital, thrown it all towards going to get CeeDee Lamb instead, and changed everything. That was amazing how close things get to completely different outcomes.
There was a report that the Eagles also tried to get up to get CD Lamb as well. And I think the Falcons asked for a second rounder. They turned it down. That's a big, we'll get to the Eagles on Thursday, and their fans are very upset. I tried to tell them they shouldn't be yesterday. But that would have been, I know, but that would have been Jalen Reagor and Jalen Hurts in exchange for CD Lamb. I mean, we should be writing these down and trying to keep track of these through the years.
Right.
Like, here's what they actually wanted to do.
Yeah.
And what the difference would have been. I mean, if Jalen Hurts has any kind of value, I think that's a win, you know, because there's not a huge difference probably between Reagor and CD Lamb unless one is a complete bust. I will say that about wide receivers. Of all the if the people that tuned into the draft show, for all of the just trade down and take a wide receiver discussion that we had, there is a high bust rate for wide receivers, right? I mean, there is a volatility to these positions that must be considered. So just circling back to the Dolphins right now, though, the thing I love the best is the roles. You could see them filling out roles on their roster. Again, I didn't love Austin Jackson at 18. I don't love him as a player. Good footwork, has to work on his hands. He feels like a developmental third-round prospect. That's too high for my liking. We'll see what happens there with him. Robert Hunt, interior player that played a little tackle at Louisiana. I mean, so Jackson and Hunt, they're trying to add to that offensive line to help Tua. You need to do that. So from a strategy standpoint, like it. Noah Igbenogany, their late first-round pick, only 20 years old. He has some beautiful matchup man coverage skills. Doesn't have a great feel for football right now. They're in a man-heavy scheme, though, and I think you can work with that. And the fact that he's playing the slot while you already have two perfect outside corners in Byron Jones and Xavier Howard, that's great. So they're going to play man, and to follow the Patriots blueprint. Remember the Patriots in 2000? It was 2014. I don't know if I've ever seen a team as perfectly constructed as their secondary for what they wanted to do. They wanted to play matchup man. So it was like, old school 5-on-5 basketball. So they had Revis to cover the best route runner. They had Brandon Browner to cover whoever the big target was, right? He's not great at everything, but he's good at covering some big targets. They had Kyle Arrington, who was really good covering the slot. And they had Patrick Chung, who was really good at covering tight ends. They had Jamie Collins, who could cover running back. Everything that they wanted to deploy, they could do it. They had an answer for what the offense was going to throw at them. So now the Dolphins, they had Brandon Jones, who in our draft guide gets a Patrick Chung comp because he's not a great all-around safety. He was much lower on our draft board than 70 where he went, but he's really good at covering tight ends. So I like that they can deploy their secondary resources the way they need to be deployed. Then they grabbed Curtis Weaver, a guy that we had as a first-round caliber player going in the 5th. So overall, really, really like the Dolphins draft. Liked that they had a plan. I think Tua obviously is the thing that makes it work or not work. And those two offensive linemen, Austin Jackson and Robert Hunt, will be a huge key to this thing as well.
Yep.
How they develop. Good on the Dolphins?
Also, they drafted a long snapper. And Daniel Jeremiah was like, I'm going to admit I didn't watch the LSU long snapper guys, so I don't have an awful lot here. Our special teams guys informed me that he's good for a long snapper. So you may have drafted a long snapper, but apparently you drafted a good one.
They were going to be a B+ draft until we looked up.
Saw the long snapper, right? Changed everything.
Up to A-. All right, moving on to the New England Patriots. I have an article on PFF.com today that is essentially saying it's business as usual for the New England Patriots. That is the headline coming out of Foxborough. What is the post-Tom Brady era? The same thing. Some trades down, some trades up, some versatile defensive players, a second-round defensive back for like the 20th year in a row, a kicker. I mean, this is just Bill Belichick, drafting with his dog. This is business as usual in New England. No panic in Belichick and the Patriots, despite not having Tom Brady. That's the story, I think.
So I got asked on radio this morning, do you think there was ever a point in the draft where they were targeting a quarterback and it just sort of didn't unfold that way and they went different ways? Or were they from the outset going to be like, we're looking for next year anyway. We're either next year or the Cam Newton, Andy Dalton sweepstakes, whatever it is. They were never really in the market for a 2020 draft quarterback.
Belichick has some quote that said that wasn't the plan, to not get a quarterback. And then they traded up. Here's the thing. They traded up twice in the 3rd round. And usually when you trade up, you're like, okay, this has to be a quarterback. You're investing a little extra to go get this quarterback. They traded up twice to get tight ends, both times. So if Belichick's being truthful and saying the intention was to draft a quarterback, it could not have been anybody after the top 4. So it could have just been like Jalen Hurts in the second round. Like if there was one, my guess is it was like if Tua falls, sure, we'll make a move. He goes at 5. They had a shot at Josh Love, Jordan Love, whatever. They passed on that and traded out. Jalen Hurts went just before him, just before the 60th pick, right? Let me just double check that. Yeah, Jalen Hurts went at 53. The Patriots were at 60. I'm guessing if Belichick's saying, hey, we may have wanted a quarterback and it just didn't work out that way, based off the other opportunities that they had to get a Jake Fromm, a Jacob Eason, whoever else, Nathan Stanley, all these other guys, I'm thinking maybe it was Jalen Hurts in the second round where they were considering it. That's just a guess.
That would have been interesting. I think that the Patriots would have been in the market we said this before the draft, that if Tua started to slide, the Patriots were prepared to make a jump and go get him. But instead, that was all smoke. The Dolphins took him at 5. And at that point, the Patriots are basically looking for 2021. I am kind of surprised that they didn't punt entirely and try and get like a first round pick out of next year. Now, maybe they did. And again, like nobody was calling, nobody was biting, whatever.
Yeah.
But if the Patriots had come out of this draft having turfed their top pick or one of their top 2 picks for a first round next year, I wouldn't have been surprised in the slightest. In fact, I would have expected them to do that. But yeah, it doesn't really look like they were targeting quarterback, at which point you're right. The rest of this draft is like the most Patriots thing ever. We take an athletic, say there's a defensive back from a small school that nobody else is really tracking that high. Josh Uche is the pick that I absolutely love. I think I was saying that when I watched him, didn't really know what to do with him, but he struck me as a guy that could have this sort of Dante Hightower type career at the next level if the team's going to use him that way. Not quite a like-for-like comparison, but the fact that he went to New England, I think, is unbelievably perfect for him.
Yeah, I mean, they filled out the guys that they need to replace a little bit. Uche could play a Kyle Van Noy role. I mean, Van Noy was truly a half edge, half linebacker during the Patriots. His Patriots run. Hightower has done similar things. Uche had the highest pass rush win rate of any edge defender over the last 2 years in the draft class. Like, he's pretty good. So that was a good pick. The Kyle Duggar pick from Lenore Rhine, small school, obviously, but he goes to the Senior Bowl, has like 98th percentile athletic testing, and at the Senior Bowl showed he could cover tight ends. I posted a video of that on Twitter the other day. Every top of the route, he had a little tug on the jersey, just a little bit on a bunch of them, but it was more like the way he could close on the catch point and use that athleticism on the field. So I could see why he's intriguing. We talked about Patrick Chung earlier. Like, Duggar could probably be that matchup guy against tight ends and then develop into a more expanded safety role. So I think that's a good fit there. Anthony Jennings, edge defender in the third round, more of a run stopper. And then the 2 tight ends, Devin Asiasi and Dalton Keene, they're both not incredibly athletic, but they're more athletic than the tight ends the Patriots had on the roster last year. So that's what you got. Asiasi's he's huge. He's a monster. He's like 280. Has a little wiggle at the top of his routes. Dalton Keene's more of an H-back move tight end who does move well. So all those guys will, I think their first 5 picks have a chance to contribute, but it's an unexciting Belichick draft. Like, if you still have Tom Brady, it's like, all right, yeah, really business as usual. There's no wide receivers, despite people thinking it's a big weakness. Belichick even said, hey, we spent a second rounder on Mohamed Sanu. Like, they're sitting there saying, we have Edelman. We need Sanu to be better. We need N'Keal Harry to develop. Like, that's what they're expecting out of their wide receiver core.
It's also what makes me think that their whole scenario is focused on next year anyway. Like, what's the point in getting a first-round receiver for Jarrett Stidham, right? Like, no, we're going to maintain the defense, because the defense is the one thing in this team that's really good right now. We're going to maintain the defense because A, it won't be good enough that we win a bunch of games when we're out of the top of the draft next year anyway. And B, if we then get the quarterback next year, we can't have a defense that's fallen to disrepair in the meantime while we wasted picks on weapons that weren't a factor. So they've maintained the defense. They're going to punt essentially on the offense until they have the quarterback. And it seems like they have to be focusing at the top of next year's draft to make that happen. So I think everything the Patriots did, their strategy is now laser focused on the 2021 draft. And this year is about treading water until then.
All right, it's a B for the New England Patriots. Rounding out the AFC East, we've got the New York Jets. A draft. Where did we end up grading? We went B+ with the Jets. This is one where I think really could go either way. There's, Mekhi Becton's the first pick at number 11, the offensive tackle. We talked quite a bit about their strategy. Let's go tackle first, grab receivers later. They followed that. I'm good with that as a strategy. We've also talked about Becton having some question marks in pass protection, mauling, run blocker. So, yeah, I'm fine with it. They needed a tackle. I like the idea of continuing to build that offensive line. And then Denzel Mims in the second, which you are not thrilled about because you don't think the pairing with Sam Darnold is great.
Dude, somebody transcribed me saying that Denzel Mims was a loser of the draft day. Transcribed that, put it took a picture of it on Twitter, tagged Denzel Mims and all of the Jets offensive linemen in it. And we're like, look at this guy calling Mims a loser. Like, some people are just garbage.
So let me just say, look, you're a fan of football, obviously. This is why you got into this. I'm a fan of football. But our fandom does not compare to the fans that are they're just trying to motivate their team. All right? Look, I can't do much behind my keyboard to help my team win. I'm not going to be in on a bunch of plays, but the one thing I can do is tag them on social media and motivate them.
If
right?
you are snitching,
Mims is going to be hanging that in his locker for the next 8 years. He's going to have a 10 touchdown season and remember it because the guy transcribed it and sent it to him and motivated him. You're just helping your team win when you do that. That's it.
If you are snitching on people on Twitter, tagging players in that, you are a genuinely worthless human being.
You need to find better followers, man. That's what
that is a cretinous thing to be doing ever. Look, even in that quote, I love Denzel Mims. I was higher on him than most people. I think Josh Norris might have beaten me overall, but outside of Josh, I was right there with him. I think Mims might have been the third best receiver on this draft. I just have massive concerns that the Jets are the team he gets to show that with. Sam Darnold has shown flashes, but the same thing, that sentence holds true right back to the start of his college career. Sam Darnold has basically only ever shown flashes, whether it's in college or the NFL. He has yet to develop into the kind of guy that can elevate the play of a receiver. The offensive line that they've added a ton of them. And the potential is there for all of those guys. They've all shown flashes of being good again, but the potential is also there for all of them to work out badly. Like even guys, people are like, what about McGovern and Greg Van Roten? Yeah, their most recent evidence is good. And, it's good, not great. But there's also a lot of bad in there as well. You don't have to go back far before those guys have crappy grades. So my whole point is that I think you've added like 6 or 7 offensive linemen. I don't know that any of them is better than a coin flip to be good next year. Now, maybe you can argue that guys like McGovern and Van Roten, because their most recent play is the best of their career, they're more than a coin flip. But okay, let's say, and somebody was saying, well, if 3 of those coin flips work out, it's better. It's way better than last year. True, but it probably does take 3 to move the needle. Like if 2 coin flips work out and they got 2 good players in the offensive line, 3 bad, that's still a terrible offensive line. If 1 works out, it's useless. If 3 work out, probably, depending on how bad the other 2 weak links are. My whole point is that the entire Jets approach has been one of relatively unsure things. Gamble. I don't know been fine.
What are the other options, though, Sam?
For the offensive line?
They didn't have many other options on the offensive line, right?
Yeah, no, they did. They absolutely did. Let's, instead of just throwing volume at guys that have been good and bad, let's sign Jason Peters and lock down a spot that is good. Let's trade for Trent Williams and lock down a spot that I don't have to worry about left tackle anymore.
I wouldn't trade.
There were plenty of options.
They have so much rebuilding to do. They still have, even with the recent investments, still have one of the worst groups of receivers and corners. I mean, their short-term outlook is not good, right? Sure. They are not good in the right spots. They would need their receiver. They need Brashad Perryman to play like the first rounder, which he showed flashes of last year. They need Denzel Mims to contribute, or they need Josh Doxson to play like a first rounder. Or their short-term outlook is not good.
Right.
So I mean, I don't know what other options they have. I think it's got to be, it's a slow build over there for Joe Douglas. I just think it is. I'm not saying they made the right moves. I'm just not saying, I don't think there was like but door number 2 that had a whole bunch of better options,
The problem with a slow build is how long do you give Sam Darnold before you start looking for a quarterback again? Like, this is basically it for Darnold. If you don't know what he is at the end of this year, you have to start looking again. And if you don't, and you're not going to know what he is at the end of this year if everything around him is still terrible.
You have to set realistic expectations and say, can you at least just elevate what we've given you? We've given you crap, but elevate it. I mean, that's what you want to see. Elevated crap. That's how you define Darnold's season. Yeah. So look, Becton at left tackle, Mims, they're attacking the right positions. I think there's a little boom or bust to these guys. I still would have liked to see more receiver investment too, a little bit later on in the draft.
That is exactly the point, right? In a vacuum, I don't think this is a bad draft at all. The only issue I have with it and them generally is I think their entire approach to this rebuild has been a little bit boom or bust in every single instance. And okay, you hope that the net of all that the mean of all these gambles is enough of them pay off, that things go well. But if I'm trying to rebuild from the ground up, I want more sure things than I want boom or bust gambles. Like, look at the Dolphins, right? The Dolphins did more sure things than they did boom or bust gambles. And I think that's the smarter way of doing it.
Ashton Davis in the 3rd round was a good value pick, a guy that there's some injury question marks and some workout question marks because he didn't work out, but he was a guy that we thought as a fringe 1st round talent at
Bryce
safety.
Hall is a steal.
And Bryce Hall in the 5th round is an absolute steal as well. Again, injury concerns, but the payoff there could be great because he looked like a future 1st round corner after the 2018 season. Forced incompletion rate of 28.2%. That was the best in 2017 and 18 in college football. So there's a lot to like about this Jets draft. Could look really good in a couple of years. Like every draft, we'll see what happens with Mekhi Becton and Denzel Mims. They'll determine a lot of it. So that is the AFC East. We're going slower than expected, Sam, as always.
Shocker.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.